coal, steel, oil, has a raw material that defines its historical moment. In ours, it is information, and Google has become its preeminent steward. The sense of historical predestination is illusory, however, an artifact of hindsight. Google's power derives from its financial base, which was built upon an accidental discovery 2 years after the company's founding that plain text advertisements on its search results pages produce enormous profits. Neither Larry Page nor Sergey Brin, the company's co-founders, who met as graduate students in computer science at Stanford University, predicted, nor did anyone else, that those unobtrusive ads would form the foundation of a business that within 7 years would be accorded by investors a historic high valuation in early November 2007 of $225 billion. The ad giveth, and the ad taketh away, too. Bright future prospects for those ads drove Google's share price up to its historic peak, and when future prospects for continued growth in ad revenue dimmed, investors' interest cooled. In the last quarter of 2007, Google enjoyed 30% annual growth in the number of clicks on its paid ads, but the growth disappeared in early 2008. When evidence surfaced that the number of clicks in the first 2 months of 2008 was flat, and when dark economic clouds gathered, portending a global recession and a difficult market for ad sales for Google by mid-March 2008, investors sent Google's share price down 45% from its historic peak of $747. Then, when Google reported in April that its ad sales in the first quarter of 2008 had remained strong, its shares soared 20% in a single day. Google's dependence upon text ads is especially remarkable, given that advertising was entirely absent in the original business plans of the founders. When the Google search engine was first made available to the public, visitors noticed superior search results, but they also noticed the service was entirely free of commercial messages. Google spared them the irritating pop-ups, flashing banners, and other mutating forms of advertisements that at that time were competing in an escalating arms race for a visitor's attention on the web. Brin and Page were hostile to the very notion of permitting advertising on a search site. In an April 1998 academic paper prepared when they were still students, they criticized advertising-funded search engines, which they believed would be inherently biased towards the advertisers and away from the needs of the consumers. They argued that for a search engine to remain immune from the temptation of biased results, it would have to remain in the academic realm. Even after Google moved from its first home, a Stanford dorm, to a rented garage off campus, Brin and Page moved cautiously in permitting advertising on their site. They decided to introduce advertisements as an experiment, restricting the format to 3 very short lines of text and a web address, which were placed on the right margin of the search results page and displayed only if the advertisement was directly relevant to the search term. This was sufficiently unorthodox that even some within Google were skeptical that plain text ads would succeed in attracting attention. Marissa Mayer, a Google vice president and early employee, later recalled that a colleague leaned over at the meeting that settled on the details of the text-only advertising and predicted, "You wait. In a month, we'll be selling banners." When Google offered the ads on a trial basis in 2000, prospective advertisers were invited to spend a modest sum to see if plain text ads, matched to the keyword phrase used in a search, would draw customers. The effectiveness of the ads was easy to measure. Only if a user clicked on the ad was it deemed successful. Google's offer was risk-free for advertisers. They would pay only when users clicked. Initially, the text ads were displayed so sparingly that they went largely unnoticed. The self-imposed requirement that advertisements had to be meaningfully related to the search phrase meant that in 85% of all Google searches in 2000, no advertisements were shown at all, because the search phrase had no relation to any commercial product or service offered by Google's advertisers. Brin said in an interview at the time that he heard Google visitors report that they never saw an advertisement. Even in 2001, the advertisements were still so unobtrusive that how Google made money remained a mystery to journalists and analysts. The founders showed no indication.